So this video is going to show you how to get your files out of Lightroom. Keep in mind that if you are looking to share them with the class, you can't just grab the original file from your camera. You have to export the file and essentially create a new file that applies everything that you've done to your images. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to move this for a second, is I'm going to click on my library module. And I'm going to grab the images that I want to share or to export. And you can do that by clicking on an individual one. You can click on Command on a Mac, Control on a PC, and click to get additional images. You could also hold down Shift and get a series, and it'll grab whatever the first click was, or the first image select was, and whatever the last one is, and everything in between. So I want to grab a few so that you can get an idea of what they look like, because you'll often be exporting 4, 5, 6 images together. So I want to go down here to the export button in the library module. I'm going to make sure this gets pulled over. I hope this gets shared in the video. We have a bunch of different tabs, different options here. So I'm going to start with choosing my location. I normally put them in the same folder as my original, although for organizational purposes, you may want to export your files into a different folder so that they're easier to find. So you're just looking at the files that you've exported. But my practice doing organizing things is that I make a folder with each time I go out and photograph and keep all the images together. And then I'll take the exported images and I'll make them appear back in that folder. I just change the file names so that they're easy to find. So that's what I do, but you could also put them into a subfolder, which I used to do in practice. And that way it sort of separates those out into a lower level folder. This option for add to this catalog would make them reappear with those edits in Lightroom so that you can find one that you've then edited further. And there is an option here where you can create a new name for the exported file. I actually do that in the next box, or you could overwrite the original file. But what I tend to do is to rename it. So what I rename it as is not the original file name, but I typically go to custom file name - original file number. The reason I like to do this, and I want you to do this, is that it makes it easier to find. So I'm going to put in my name, and I use underscores as spaces typically, and then I have to put in project number. So we'll say like project 2, right? And then, oh, I'm sorry, not the original file number. I meant custom file name - sequence. There we go, that's better. So it'll say my name, which makes it easier for me to find your images. And if we group them all together and make like a slideshow out of them, all of your files will be then grouped together if they're all starting with the same name in them. And then project 2, so that you know what project was for, and so that I know what they go to when I go to grade them. And then the sequence number, simply, if I type in Nate Matthews project 2 in the top box, it will add the sequence 1, or in this case, I have 4 photos selected. So if I export them, it'll be -1, -2, -3, -4. So it groups them together nicely and gives them a unique file name. We don't have any video projects in here, so I haven't opened up that tab. But under file settings, I want to note that there are many options here, and the ones that we will typically use in photography are JPEG. JPEG is good for the internet. It is, however, a lossy compression file, so it throws out a little information each time that you save with it. And so if you save it 20 times, it's definitely going to be a less detailed image. JPEG is, PSD is Photoshop document. That is what we typically use in Photoshop, although we won't be using in this class, so we don't need to worry about that. TIFF is a non-lossy compression that supports layers, so it is slightly smaller file size than a PSD, but it still works for the same purposes. PNG we don't typically use, but it's also a good format for internet. DNG is digital negative group, the Adobe version of RAW, which we're not going to be sharing with each other. online because it won't work for online viewing very well. And then there's original, which will default to whatever the original file was. So we're going to select JPEG. For the color space, sRGB works fine for the internet, but best practice would be to go with the largest color space so you get more colors saved in your file in case you ever print it. So I'd recommend you stick with ProPhoto RGB. Then there's this option to limit file size to 100 kilobytes. We don't want that, although that is something that would be a good idea if you're saving and showing things on the internet. We're sharing through Zoom, so probably better to have a larger file size, but if we were posting to the internet, that's what we want to go with. And then there's a quality option, and I normally push the quality all the way to the max because we don't want to lose that much JPEG quality, even though these are meant for just sharing for class. All right, the next tab is resizing to fit. For the purpose of this class, I don't believe that we'll need to resize to fit any particular size, so I would leave this off. But just know that for future purposes, if you wanted to share a smaller file dimension or resolution, this would allow you to set the dimensions, the width and height, or we'd kind of keep it within a width and a height, long edge, short edge, megapixels, percentage. You could size things down. So for artists, there's often a call for work parameters that says something like 1500 pixels max in width and height. So if I type those in, it would easily keep those within whatever the specified dimensions are. And then a resolution if there is one specified. But again, I'm going to leave that off. There's an option to sharpen for screen. For the purpose of this class, I think that is probably something that's a good idea to do. You could also do it for matte paper or glossy paper if we were printing, but sharpening is a good idea. It makes your image a little bit crisper. So I'll recommend you keep that on. And I'm going to include the metadata. We don't want to put a watermark on our photos, although if you're working commercially and you want to share images, including a watermark is a way of protecting people from taking your images and not stealing them and not paying you. In the fine art world, this is kind of frowned upon, so I wouldn't recommend it. And then there's an action for what it should do once it has exported the photos. You can see my default is for it to open in Adobe Photoshop because I usually do additional editing after Lightroom, but for the purpose of class, we're not going to do that. You could have it do nothing. You could have it open in another application. The setting that I would suggest is Show in Finder, which on a Mac means that it opens up a Finder window so that if you walk away from your computer and you come back, you'll remember that what you did and then, oh, I still need to grab the files from that location and upload them onto D2L. So that's what I'm going to do. And when I hit export, it's going to save them in whatever folder I set it to be at. And you'll see the file name and all 4 as individual JPEGs. For the purpose of time, I will just say that rather than actually showing you that. And that is how to export.